Welcome to Just Thinking. The town election is on May 21st, and to help you learn about the candidates, I will be interviewing each one that is running for a contested seat. I will ask the same questions of each candidate for an office so we can compare and draw our own conclusions from their responses. These interviews run about 20 minutes each and can be found on the Holliston Cable Access Facebook page and at www.hcattv.org. So you can watch anywhere and at any time. So my candidate this time is Matt Coletti. And Matt, you are currently on the Economic Development Committee, if I understand correctly.
I am. Yep,
okay,
2 years running.
Okay, so let's just start with some general information about who you are and you know, what your professional background is and your relationship with Holliston.
Yep, born and raised in Newton. Lived here in Holliston for 10 years. Moved here after a short time in Newton, started my career in law, was legally trained, practiced law for a short while, started in banking, moved into compliance, and now work in banking operations.
Compliance for banks, right?
Yeah, consumer finance regulation. Somewhere in between all of that, too, I went to business school and got an MBA as well. So. Okay,
gotcha. All right.
Kept me busy.
Yeah, I guess and a family, too, to keep you busy,
sorry.
too?
2 sons. They're 9 and 7. Oh. And my wife also met in law school.
Oh, okay, so. Great. So why are you interested in this position for selectman?
You know, at first I was fearful that no one would run. Seems there's a relatively low rate of participation, which is one of the reasons why I ended up on the Economic Development Committee. It was something that I felt passionate about. That is, maintaining and preserving the charm of downtown, and wanted to be involved in that regard. And again, recognized that participation rate was low across town, and with the kind of high school issue being so prevalent this past year. I thought it was an appropriate time to get involved, and I did. Okay. So what do you think the specific skills or experiences you have what are you bringing to bear on this position in particular? Creative thinking, ability to synthesize large amounts of information, arrive at strategic conclusions, challenge assumptions, think outside the box. I know it's cliche, but combining all the disciplines, being able to translate regulation, accounting, language, finance, bring it all together, and have a more sophisticated discussion, across the departments, across those involved who come to Board of Select meetings, and just to engage in a more thoughtful discussion is really my hope.
Okay. Besides the Economic Development Committee, do you have any other local government experience? Not necessarily just here. Anywhere.
Sure. I started first with a stint on the tuition-free kindergarten task force. I think was 2015 or 2016. It was around the time that my children were in kindergarten. And after that, had considered things like school committee, but it was only after the Economic Development Committee that I started to really enjoy kind of being involved. And I'm now a member of the 9 Green Street Committee, which is newly formed. We haven't met yet, but I just received my appointment papers for that. So that one I think will be interesting, and I look forward to that. So.
Oh, I have a lot of information about that one.
I'm sure.
So how do you feel about town meeting? Are you a regular attendee, and what are your feelings about it?
I try to attend. I've attended the past few, and I enjoy them. I think it's a good opportunity to appear and be heard. I enjoy the participation there. I enjoy watching folks stand up, raise their hand, ask a question, and I think it's a relatively inviting environment.
Wow, I love it. We'll do a promo with you for town meeting.
Yeah, I think it's a place where people should feel comfortable to show up and voice their concerns or ask a question, and and be heard by their peers. For that reason, I like it. I don't want to say they're entertaining, but you can never really know. Sometimes you never really know what happens there. So yeah, I do like attending them. As I said, with the two boys, very very active schedules, it can be a challenge. But
Yeah, no, there's no question. We all battle that.
Sure.
So, what do you think are the 3 most important functions in the Office of Selectmen?
I think firstly serving as a representative voice for the community and kind of putting aside predispositions, any biases you might have, and understand that it's a representative position. Yeah, I understand that's a challenge, but I think it's important. Beyond that, problem solving. There's a lot that comes before that committee that is essential to what happens. It affects a lot of people, and being able to take what's presented in, assess it, and arrive at some sort of dialogue that can be had with those that are there before you that leads toward progress, I think is a worthwhile endeavor when you're on this committee. And lastly, I would just say kind of an active presence in the community, and while participating on the board, being involved in local affairs, appearing at local events, being active and present in the community, and getting a sense of the way people are feeling is important when you're serving as a representative. So, again, I think it's just important to understand your constituency and the way they feel, and listen and be available. So,
going back to the second point, the having discussions and engaging, and do you think that there are gaps at the moment? So,
I'm only going to speak globally. I've enjoyed attending the meetings that I have, and I think that what I've seen of the board so far, they serve as good models for dialogue, and I think that dialogue is important. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I've observed gaps myself. I've not been present enough to observe, and comment on gaps, but I would say that they're good models for how to engage in thoughtful discourse with those who are present there, and really ensure that you're speaking on behalf of and in the best interest of Holliston's citizens. So I would just attempt to follow that model.
Historically, we have been lucky that on our boards, people are generally amiable and get along with one another, whereas some other towns in the region have been known for being on the front page of the newspaper with internal battles and combat and so forth. So
it seems very civil from what I've observed.
It is civil, and I really think it pretty much always has been, at least in my experience. So speaking more specifically, what is the top change, improvement, or service you want to see in place by the end of your 3-year term, should you be elected?
Well, I've already given some clue toward it, but given that I understand there's more or less a pre-existing plan in place to service water infrastructure, which I do consider a priority. I think it's a shame that people would end up moving to this town and find that their house is getting brown water once a month.
Horrifying.
I can't imagine the horror. Thankfully, I never had to deal with that in the neighborhood where we started and now where we live. But I can't imagine anything more frustrating than that surprise.
Yep.
So given that that is settled, within a 3-year term, I would hope to see a definitive plan toward a new high school. And I'm not saying anything in the form of commitments, only a plan. And I think the plan did start with the superintendent's request to the school building authority. But there's more work to be done after that. And again, just asking for a definitive plan and give people hope and a sense that there's progress toward that.
Okay. It's common opinion that Holliston is a popular community when you're buying a house, and in large measure because of the schools. Do you agree with that as a premise? And do you think that will continue to be true as time goes forward?
I do agree with it. It was part of the reason why we moved here. It's when we moved here, our children were toddlers, coming of age in school. We had to consider nearby childcare options first. We didn't have enough forethought to think about whether or not the school did offer itself a childcare option. Our youngest did go through that, and it was great that that option existed, especially as he transitioned into school with his brother. So that aside, I would like to see some more childcare options in town. I know we're talking about schools, but I do think that's an important priority, and it's not something necessarily governed, but I would invite that sort of
conversation
addition in town, right? So that aside, I understand there's diversity in the programs that are offered at the early stages. My kids have done well in Placentino. I think it's a great school. I think they do a great job over there. I have concerns only when I pause to look at the metrics of Holliston as compared to some of its neighboring peers. I know that they're just metrics and they don't mean everything, but it is something that outsiders will take into consideration when they're looking at Holliston compared to Ashland, Hopkinton, Dover, Sherborne, Medway. Their stats in comparison, in addition to the condition of their schools, I think would sway a lot of decisions in the home buying process. And I fear that Holliston is kind of losing in that race, and that I do perceive as a race because of our dependence upon a residential tax base to sustain our budget. So we do want to attract families. I do believe that it remains an attractive place, and I think the schools are the primary driver for that. I think the promise of a new high school would rejuvenate some of that interest in Holliston. I can only imagine that it currently serves as a deterrent.
And just sort of a further question on that point, not the latter point, but in general, when you say that the school's metrics, what are you speaking to?
AP course utilization, I guess, or participation rates in AP classes, and I understand SAT scores are relatively comparable as well, but I understand those are large drivers, and I can't speak to MCAS scores. I've not followed those closely enough, but just for some of the commentary that I had seen and followed, and I understand, again, not a good source of metrics, but they're the only metrics that exist. And when you're in a community of parents, this is what folks are looking at, and they're the school rankings that come out on sites, or Boston Magazine, or I don't think U.S. News necessarily. But the point is, those broader publications that issue sort of those scorecards that make you think, how did they arrive at this? You shake your head, but the point is that people look at those, and objective or not, they exist, and people look at them, and those are some of the metrics they use, and spending per student.
Yeah, that's a biggie.
Yeah, and I know we do well. I understand schools make up probably greater than half of our town budget. I understand that, but again,
it used to be more, actually.
Yeah, it's it's the main driver of new families coming to Holliston.
So there was a Facebook question from a resident. What are your thoughts about the former Gulf Station downtown?
Sure.
And I will insert here, as I have with others, it's privately owned, so let's just keep that in mind. Is there anything that the town could do with it in the future that you can just imagine? What would you propose? This is just sort of one of those out-of-the-box kinds of...
Yeah, no, it feels like a planted question because I didn't run. I chose to go on the Economic Development Committee, which had vacancies in part because of my feelings about the Gulf Station. Personally, I think we all can recognize that it's an eyesore. On that, on that committee, I've made attempts at various points to look at options, and some of the first things I considered proposing, or I had proposed, and they're discussed, and these are all in the minutes. Anyone can go back and look, but was a vacant building registry. It's an idea that Arlington had implemented, and it's, it imposes slight, penalties for, failing to maintain buildings and things of that nature. But, that program was awarded by the Massachusetts Municipal Association, and forgive me if I don't have that name, but
you do have the right one.
Thank you. So anyhow, that was something we talked about. Didn't feel it was, it felt a little too penal. I've been a proponent of a stronger nuisance bylaw. Nuisance, all towns have those. Basically, the rights between persons and their use and acts. My law professors are probably like, did this guy even go to law school? I can't remember. But the point is, what rights can we give to private citizens under a nuisance bylaw to take stronger action with respect to blighted properties or those that are, in disrepair, to kind of enforce their own rights as abutters. And nuisance bylaws can give greater rights to inspectors, boards of health, and things of that nature to enforce, particularly focusing on blighted properties, those that are abandoned, vacant, very common. Discussed a model after a Framingham bylaw and suggested maybe considering that. Again, nuisance just something posing a hazard to a community. And kind of lastly, we invited the owner in to speak to the committee, and he came, and he was, apologetic and recognized the condition of it. He told us a little bit about his family history and some of the challenges he's confronted, and had not so much committed, but said that he had plans for this spring. He'd replace the canopy and redo the building. And I know there's been some interest from other property owners here in town, and I think that there's visions of using it as a cute bike shop or an ice cream stand or something like that, and those are great. I would be in support of anything other than what it currently is, but I know that there are business owners in town who would make use of it in its current state as a just another repair shop or something of that nature, and anything.
We have a lot of those.
Anything we do. But if that's the quickest and easiest transition, something that brings it back to life, and you're right, it is currently privately owned, so there's nothing the town can do, even as an abutter on 9 Green Street. But hopefully something will be done, and I'll hope to work in whatever manner, privately or otherwise. Sorry, let me just shut off my phone here.
Yeah, it's the first time I think that we've forgotten to ask. We usually are very painful about that. So, moving on, your personal vision for what Holliston will look like or should look like in 5 to 10 years, and how that might be different from today.
I don't think it's going to be very different. I expect it to be the same, and by that I mean I would hope to retain kind of the charm and character of the downtown area, improve upon it as best we can. That's one thing that we're working on now. You'll see it on the warrant in the next town meeting, which is Monday. An article relating to a small business grant program, which we modeled after an Ashland program in the Economic Development Committee, and have sought authority to exercise this. So that would hopefully provide another means of aesthetics and beautifying downtown, to benefit the public through private enterprise. So I know there's large tracts of land currently available for residential purchase. I imagine developers will snatch those up, put in either some more luxury homes, senior living, or affordable housing, all of which again would be relatively welcome. And I would, though I appreciate the value that it's given to places like Medfield, Medway, Ashland, that is large commercial strips, large tracts, I am pleased with the current state of our commercial zoning. I think Hopping Brook, there's still room to grow. And I would, for the most part, resist larger retail commercial developments unless they were strategically situated. Again, so as not to disturb kind of the character of our downtown. I think there are parts of Route 16 that could, again, if someone were willing to invest, support a type of retail establishment that maybe had, a cafe, childcare option, something of that kind, just some more restaurants. Though again, I'm pleased to see what's happening at the corner of the former Jasper Hill. I think those owners are going to do very well. And,
I had lunch there today. It was great.
I wish them well. So I think it's going to look very much the same in 10 years.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, it actually still looks pretty much the same as it has for the 50-plus years that I've been here, and I think that's a good thing, too. I guess the one piece of that question, and I've got to do this quickly, is what role the board plays in that. And I would just say that, from my perspective, the board needs to be a leader in that, not just,
I think it's taking a strategic vision, taking a plan that relates to that vision, and allocating resources toward that vision and planning on how to allocate those resources. I know that the budget is going to be, there'll be some bonds coming off the budget in the near term, and I think that's opportunity to look at ways to reallocate what, some cushion that's currently in the budget and how to use it strategically to, again, improve parks and recreation.
I'm going to stop you there and just say that actually there isn't money in the budget as a result of that coming off.
Okay.
It's a debt exclusion.
Understood.
So,
maybe I misunderstood.
But it's a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Very common.
Okay.
Very common across town. So we have a lot of people in the school department that are kind of hoping that that's the case, but it doesn't work that way.
All right. Well, I'll double check on that.
Yeah, you want to get a little more informed on that one. But anyway, I want to give you a little bit of time to do a final pitch for yourself. Why should I vote for you?
So no bold promises here, just looking to act in the best interest of Holliston and its citizens to ensure that we can kind of maintain the character and the charm that brought so many people here to Holliston while still strategically improving upon what is currently in place and doing it wisely with what we have available to us. So.
Okay. Well, good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right, and thanks for joining me. Now that the candidates have shared their views, please be sure to do your part and vote on May 21st at the high school field house between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. Turnout for the town election in 2017 was 11%. That's just 1,100 voters. In 2018, 16% turned out. We'd like to beat that this year and hit 20% or more, so please come help us. There are also 2 questions on the ballot about retail marijuana to bring town bylaws into line with the latest state regulations. Local government hits you at home and is where you have the biggest influence, and Holliston is the living model of true democracy. Please participate, and thanks.